This story is titled, "My Drunk Girlfriend Confessed That She and Her Parents Hate Me, so I decided to stop wasting time on wedding preparations and made sure she paid the price." Hey Reddit, my name is Derek, and I'm 28 years old. I never thought I'd be one of those guys with a story like this, but here we are. I grew up in a blue-collar neighborhood in Detroit, where I was raised to believe in honest work, straightforward talk, and keeping your word. These weren't just abstract concepts in my family. They were lived values that shaped everything we did. My dad spent 38 years at the same manufacturing plant, never missing a day unless he was genuinely sick. My mom taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school, and together they managed to put me through trade school without taking on a single dollar of debt. They weren't wealthy by any means, but they were smart with money and believed in investing in their children's future. My fiancée Madison was 25 years old and came from a completely different world. We met at a friend's pool party about 4 years ago. She was there with a coworker who knew the host, and I noticed her watching me fix the host's broken deck chair that had been wobbling dangerously all afternoon. Something just sparked between us that day. Despite our vastly different backgrounds, or maybe because of them, we were drawn to each other like magnets. She was fascinated by what she called my authenticity, while I was drawn to her confidence and the graceful way she carried herself through any situation. There was something magnetic about someone who seemed so sure of herself and her place in the world. We had been engaged for just over a year, having been together for 4 years total. Honestly, things seemed pretty solid between us. The wedding was set for next spring, save the dates were already sent out to family and friends, and we'd booked this impressive venue that was basically her dream location. Everything appeared to be falling into place perfectly. Well, almost everything was solid. There was always this persistent undercurrent of tension with her parents, Robert and Patricia. They're what you'd call old money, the kind of people who summer in Martha's Vineyard and winter in Vail without giving it a second thought. I own a successful custom motorcycle garage that I built from the ground up through years of hard work and dedication. It's a good business with decent income, but it definitely doesn't put me in their tax bracket. From day one, they made it crystal clear that I wasn't what they had in mind for their daughter. They never said anything directly. They were far too refined and socially conscious for such crude honesty. Instead, their disapproval came through 1,000 paper cuts of condescension, subtle comments, and barely concealed looks of disappointment whenever I was around. They were always present during our wedding planning, constantly checking in and offering suggestions that felt more like thinly veiled mandates. I could feel their disapproval radiating from them whenever I was in their presence, like they genuinely believed their daughter was settling for far less than she deserved. I'll never forget the dinner at their vacation home that really opened my eyes to how they saw me. We were having what I thought was a pleasant family meal when Robert suddenly handed me his car keys and asked me to take a quick look at his Porsche because it was making a funny noise. This happened right in the middle of dinner, while everyone else was still eating and having conversation. I sat there for a moment, processing what had just happened. He was treating me like I was the hired help, not their future son-in-law. When I hesitated, Madison said something about me not wanting to get my hands dirty, but there was no real defense in her tone. It was more like she was making an excuse for my reluctance rather than calling out how inappropriate her father's request was. Robert basically shrugged and said, "Well, it's what he does for a living, isn't it?" And Stephanie, Madison's older sister, didn't even try to hide her smirk while suggesting they should start paying me to be on call for their car problems whenever they needed mechanical work done. I swallowed my pride and spent 40 long minutes in their garage diagnosing and fixing a loose belt while everyone else finished their meal and continued their conversation without me. When I finally came back inside, Patricia had the nerve to offer me a plate she'd kept warm, like it was some kind of generous favor she was doing for the help. Nobody at that table acknowledged how completely messed up the whole situation was. When I got home that night, I immediately called Tyler and told him about the entire incident. Tyler's been my best friend since high school. He works construction and has never once hesitated to call out BS when he sees it. He's also never pulled a punch when I need to hear the truth, even when it hurts. "Dude, they basically called you the help to your face," he said, grabbing another beer from the mini fridge in my garage. "What's next? Asking you to park their cars when guests arrive for dinner parties?" Rex, my German shepherd, seemed to sense my frustration and rested his head on my knee while I scratched behind his ears. "Madison says they're just protective of her," I explained, though even as I said it, the words felt hollow. "Protective, bro. They're not protecting her from you." Tyler shook his head vigorously. "They're protecting their freaking social status. I wouldn't put up with that treatment for a single second." I shrugged, feeling defeated. "You know how it is when you love someone. When you love someone, You don't let their family treat them like garbage, Tyler countered immediately. And you definitely don't let anyone treat you like garbage either, no matter how much you love their daughter. The worst part was how Madison always brushed off these incidents when I tried to talk to her about them. They're just protective, she'd say with a dismissive wave of her hand. They want the best for me. At first, I believed her because that's what you do when you love someone. You trust them and give them the benefit of the doubt. We had set up a joint account specifically for wedding expenses, and we each contributed $2,700 to it. My contribution came from years of carefully building my business and saving every dollar I could. Her contribution was probably funded by her parents, though we never discussed the specifics of where her money came from. The total of about $55,000 was meant to cover the wedding we were planning together. Looking back now, there were warning signs I completely missed at the time. Madison started having more and more private phone calls with her parents, and especially with Stephanie. She'd step out of the room whenever these calls came in, lowering her voice to barely above a whisper. She also started questioning decisions we'd already made together about the wedding. Things we'd settled months earlier suddenly became topics for debate again. But when you're in the middle of a relationship, deeply in love and planning a future together, you don't always see what's happening right in front of you. Stephanie had Madison's ear from the very beginning of our relationship. She was the divorced older sister who positioned herself as someone who knew men and was constantly warning Madison about the dangers of settling for less than she deserved. She would regularly send Madison articles about women who had married beneath their social status and lived to regret it. Even more disturbing, she actively introduced Madison to her wealthy friends' brothers and cousins, even after we were officially engaged. Her excuse was always the same. Just socializing, nothing wrong with having options and expanding your social circle. And Madison not only allowed this behavior but actively defended it. "She's just looking out for me," Madison would say whenever I expressed concern about Stephanie's obvious attempts to undermine our relationship. Our fights became more frequent and more intense as time went on. I would call out her family's condescension and passive-aggressive behavior, and she would immediately go on the defensive. She'd accuse me of being too sensitive or suggest that I should make more of an effort to fit into their social circle instead of expecting them to accept me as I was. After one particularly heated argument where I pointed out that Stephanie had referred to my business as my little garage business at a family dinner, said with such obvious disdain that even other guests looked uncomfortable, Madison finally snapped and said something that cut me to the bone. "Maybe I should be more ambitious," she said, her voice cold and distant. "Her father built an empire while you're content just fixing motorcycles for the rest of your life." I stared at her, seeing for the first time the contempt that had been hiding beneath the surface of our relationship. "Those motorcycles pay for half of this wedding, and they paid for that ring on your finger," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. She apologized later, claiming it was just wedding stress talking and that she didn't mean what she'd said. I accepted her apology because I thought we were working towards something real and meaningful together. The final straw came just 3 days before she left me. Stephanie had invited herself over to our place, supposedly to discuss some last-minute wedding details that couldn't wait. Madison had stepped out to pick up some Chinese food for dinner, leaving me alone with Stephanie in our living room. Rex, who had never liked Stephanie from the moment he met her, kept his distance and watched her suspiciously from his dog bed in the corner. That dog has always been an excellent judge of character, and his instincts about people have never steered me wrong. The moment Madison's car pulled out of the driveway, Stephanie's entire demeanor changed. She looked me straight in the eye and told me with complete conviction that Madison was settling by being with me. She went on to explain that Madison could have anyone she wanted, someone better than me, like the surgeon son of her father's golf buddy who had just bought a summer house in the Hamptons. When I told her she was completely out of line and needed to leave my apartment immediately, she actually laughed at me. She said she was actively working on Madison to help her see the truth about our relationship, and that Madison would eventually come to her senses and realize she deserved better than a blue-collar mechanic. When Madison got back with the food, I told her immediately what had happened. "Your sister just told me she's actively trying to break us up," I said, the moment she walked through the door with the takeout bags. "What are you talking about?" Madison asked, looking genuinely confused. "Stephanie straight up told me you're settling by being with me," I explained, my voice rising with frustration. "What does that even mean, Madison?" Her face flushed red with anger, but not at her sister. "Oh my God, Derek, you always do this." "Do what? Tell you when your family is being complete assholes to me?" I ignored it for too long just for the sake of you, but that was really messed up what she said. "No, you always twist everything they say," Madison shot back. She was probably joking around. Come on, don't take it so personally. Joking? Are you serious right now? Well, maybe if you weren't so goddamn insecure about everything, you wouldn't read malicious intent into every single interaction. Madison, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Your sister just disrespected me in my own home, and you think I'm being insecure? Yes, insecure, Madison shouted back, her composure completely gone now. Because any normal person would laugh it off instead of making it into this huge dramatic thing. And here you are defending her again, just like you always do. I'm not defending anyone. I'm just sick of every family dinner, every conversation, every interaction ending with you complaining about something they said or did. Because they treat me like dirt. Do you even see that there's a problem here? Listen, you're going to either start talking sense to them or some things are going to have to change between us. They're just responding to your attitude. You're always complaining about Stephanie, always finding fault with everything my parents do. Well, at least she doesn't make me feel like I have to choose between my family and my fiancé, she shot back, tears starting to form in her eyes. That was the last real fight we had before everything completely imploded. She slept on the couch that night while Rex slept in my bedroom. Probably the best night of his life, since he finally got to sleep on the bed without Madison complaining about dog hair on the sheets. I knew something was terribly wrong the moment I came home from work on a Thursday evening. The apartment felt different somehow, empty and hollow in a way that had nothing to do with the lights being off or the silence. Even before I realized that some of her things were missing, I could sense that something fundamental had shifted. Rex met me at the door instead of being in his usual spot on the couch, and he followed me around anxiously like he could sense the change in our home's atmosphere. Dogs have an incredible ability to pick up on emotional tension, and Rex was clearly disturbed by whatever had happened while I was at work. I found the note on the kitchen counter next to her engagement ring. 3 paragraphs of carefully crafted text that ultimately boiled down to 5 words that hit me like a physical blow. My family thinks you're worthless. The full message was longer and couched in much softer language about needing to take a break and reevaluate our compatibility and different life expectations. But those 5 words, the only ones that really mattered, burned through everything else she had written. My parents are concerned about our future together, she had written in her neat handwriting. They don't think you can provide the lifestyle I deserve. I need time to think about what I really want in life. I'll be staying with them for a while to figure things out. She didn't even have the guts to say it to my face after 4 years together. Instead, I got a note like we were casual roommates having a disagreement about rent money. I sat at the kitchen table for hours, turning her engagement ring over in my hands. That 3-carat diamond had stretched my budget to the breaking point 2 years ago, long before I had even started saving money for our wedding fund. It was the ring that had made her eyes light up when I proposed to her on the beach in San Diego. Now it sat there catching the overhead light whenever I moved it. The expensive symbol of everything that had just crumbled. Not good enough, not established enough, worthless. After 4 years together, after she had pushed for this big, elaborate wedding, after all the plans we had made together, something about the timing felt completely wrong to me. We had final venue deposits due in just a couple of weeks, and the practical side of my brain started working through the shock and hurt. This wasn't an emotional pause or a temporary break to figure things out. This was a calculated delay tactic designed to put me in an impossible position. A nasty little voice in the back of my head whispered, "Check with the venue to see what's really going on." The next morning, I called the venue coordinator to ask what I thought was an innocent question about menu details. "Hi Brenda, this is Derek Davies. I wanted to check on some menu details for our spring wedding." There was a pause that lasted far too long, and I could hear the discomfort in her voice when she finally responded. "Oh, Mr. Davies. Actually, Madison called on Wednesday afternoon. She canceled the booking entirely." Wednesday, the day before the break note. She had canceled our wedding venue before she even told me she wanted to take a break. I kept my voice as light and casual as possible. Not rescheduled to a different date? No, it was a full cancellation. She said there were unforeseen circumstances that made it impossible to continue with the wedding. The initial $9,000 deposit is non-refundable, of course. "Of course it is," I replied, my mind racing. "Thank you for letting me know." That deposit had come directly from our joint wedding account, money that was supposed to be for our shared future together. After I hung up with Brenda, I sat at my kitchen table staring at nothing, trying to process what I had just learned. The break wasn't real. It was pure theater designed to buy her time while she figured out her next move. The wedding was already dead by her own hand, killed in secret while she prepared to deliver her carefully worded note about needing space. I immediately logged into our online banking to check the joint account balance. There was $46,000 remaining. My original $2,750 contribution plus her $2,750, minus the $9,000 deposit that had just been lost forever to the venue cancellation. The math was simple and clear. My fair share of that remaining $46,000 was exactly $23,000. It was my money that had been intended for a wedding she had secretly killed while lying to my face about wanting to work things out. I transferred my $23,000 out of the joint account. It was clean, simple, and completely fair given the circumstances. Then I sent her a text message that laid out exactly what I had discovered. Madison, I just found out from the venue that you canceled everything on Wednesday before you left me that note about taking a break. So the break is clearly permanent. I've withdrawn my share of the remaining funds from the wedding account. Seems fair since there's no wedding happening. Hope you find the lifestyle you deserve. After sending that message, I blocked her number, her parents' numbers, and Stephanie's number too. I was done being manipulated and lied to. I called Tyler immediately after handling the money situation. I need a drink, was all I had to say. 20 minutes later, he was at my door with a six-pack of beer and Chinese takeout. Rex circled around us excitedly. He had always liked Tyler, probably because Tyler had a habit of sneaking him spring rolls when he thought I wasn't looking. I laid out the entire situation for him. The note, the secret venue cancellation, the money transfer, everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. Holy shit, Tyler said, letting out a low whistle as he processed everything I had told him. So she dumps you with a note after canceling the venue, but before telling you there's no wedding? That's some seriously calculated bullshit right there. Yeah, well, I'm done being the nice guy in this story, I replied, taking a long drink from my beer. Tyler raised his can in a mock toast. About damn time. Cheers to finally growing a spine, my friend. Screw you, I laughed for the first time in days, and it felt good to find some humor in the situation. Seriously though, Tyler said, suddenly becoming more sincere. You did the right thing here. She was trying to play you, and you saw right through it. Rex settled himself between us on the couch, resting his head contentedly on my lap. He seemed completely at peace now that his pack was back together, minus one member he probably wouldn't miss anyway. Sometimes the most expensive lessons in life are the ones other people have to learn at their own cost. Understanding that was going to be very expensive for Madison. The silence from her end lasted exactly 7 days. Of course, blocking someone's number is really just a suggestion these days, and determined people always find ways around it. Friday morning brought a voicemail from an unknown number. It was Madison, and she was angry rather than sad. Derek, what on earth do you think you're doing? You took money from our wedding account without permission. You can't just do that. Call me immediately so we can sort this out. Our wedding account. The account for the wedding that she had secretly canceled. The level of delusion was staggering. I didn't call her back. The voicemails were quickly followed by a barrage of emails with subject lines like urgent financial error and we need to talk now. The general theme of all her messages was that I had stolen money from her and that I was being petty and vindictive by ruining her life over what she claimed was just a temporary break. She tried to backtrack on the venue cancellation, saying it wasn't finalized and that she had been exploring options under pressure. But let's be completely honest here. A full cancellation with forfeited deposits is pretty damn final in anyone's book. She's spinning like a top, Tyler said over lunch at the diner near my shop a few days later. She thought you'd just roll over and wait patiently for her to decide whether you're worthy of her attention. Now she's scrambling because her plan backfired spectacularly. Rex was back at the shop, probably taking his afternoon nap in his favorite spot behind the counter. The guys who worked for me absolutely loved him, and customers seemed to trust a garage that had a friendly dog around. Good judge of character, I always told people when they commented on Rex. Then Patricia, Madison's mother, managed to get hold of my work email address. Her message was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive manipulation and thinly veiled threats. Derek, Madison is absolutely distraught over this situation. While we may have expressed some minor reservations about certain aspects of your relationship, your recent actions have been completely disproportionate and cruel. You have taken funds that were specifically earmarked for wedding deposits and vendor payments. Madison is now in a terrible financial position because of your vindictive behavior. As a gentleman, you should rectify this oversight immediately and return the money where it belongs. Rectify this oversight. I loved that particular phrase. As if I had accidentally tripped and my money had somehow fallen out of her account through some kind of banking mishap. The math wasn't difficult to understand, despite what they seemed to think. The $9,000 venue deposit was already gone forever. $4,500 of my money and $4,500 of hers, lost to her decision to cancel. My withdrawal of $23,000 from the remaining $46,000 left Madison with exactly her original $23,000 contribution. It really wasn't rocket science. I sent one reply to Patricia, and I made sure to copy Madison on it so there would be no confusion about my position. Dear Patricia, Madison canceled our wedding venue on Wednesday, October 11th, before informing me she wanted to take a break from our relationship. The funds in that account were specifically intended for that wedding. Since there is no wedding happening, I reclaimed my portion of the money. Madison has her full original contribution remaining in the account. Any additional financial commitments she may have made are entirely her own responsibility to handle. This matter is now closed. That email was like waving a red flag in front of an angry bull. The weekend brought an absolute barrage of missed calls and increasingly frantic emails. Derek, the caterer needs their deposit payment. The photographer is demanding money. I paid some vendors from my personal account, assuming the joint money would be available to reimburse me. You owe me thousands of dollars. Her claims about making vendor payments from her personal account, with the expectation of being reimbursed from our joint fund, gave me pause. If that was actually true, the timing of those payments would be absolutely crucial to understand. Then, Stephanie decided to escalate things by messaging me on LinkedIn of all places. Derek, listen up. You need to fix this situation right now. Madison is completely hysterical, Mom and Dad are livid, and I'm tired of dealing with all this unnecessary drama. Give her the money back and stop being such a vindictive jerk. It's just money, and God knows you need to do the right thing for once in your life. It's just money. Easy words coming from someone whose daddy's company had been paying her consulting fees for years for work that nobody could actually describe or quantify. Man, the entitlement is completely off the charts, Tyler said as he scrolled through the screenshots of messages I'd sent him. I bet none of them have ever heard the word no before in their entire privileged lives. Well, they're hearing it now, I replied, feeling more confident in my decision with each passing day. Saturday night, I found myself looking through old photos on my phone. There was one of Madison and me from last summer where we looked genuinely happy together. For a brief moment, I felt like a complete fool for throwing away 4 years. A flash of regret washed over me as I remembered all the good times we'd shared. Then I remembered the note she'd left, and particularly those 5 devastating words. My family thinks you're worthless. The cold reality settled back in immediately, and any momentary softness I'd felt disappeared entirely. Rex sensed my shifting mood and pushed his head under my hand, forcing me to pet him instead of wallowing in old memories. That dog has always been excellent therapy when I need it most. This situation was about facts, not emotions. Madison had made her choices, and now she was facing the price tag that came with those decisions. 3 weeks passed, and instead of things calming down, they actually escalated significantly. The escalation wasn't coming from me, though. I remained completely neutral, calm, and focused on collecting documentation of everything that was happening. Madison and the entire Hawthorne family, Robert, Patricia, and Stephanie, acting as their attack dog, had doubled down on their campaign of harassment and intimidation. They started employing dirty tricks and social media manipulation to try to pressure me into giving in to their demands. Madison began posting sad, cryptic messages on her social media accounts. Things like, "When trust is betrayed, you're left picking up the pieces alone," and "Some people show their true colors when things get difficult." Her friend Jessica was right there cheering her on in the comments with supportive messages like, "He never appreciated you anyway," and "You deserve so much better than this." It was annoying to see, but ultimately it was just hot air that didn't affect my actual life in any meaningful way. "You know what kills me about this whole situation," Tyler said one weekend while we were working on his truck in my garage. "They're acting like you're the villain when Madison is the one who pulled the rug out from under everything." "That's exactly how people like them see the world," I replied, sliding out from under the truck with a wrench in my hand. "When you're used to a lifetime of privilege and getting your way, basic fairness feels like oppression." "Look at you getting all philosophical on me," Tyler laughed, handing me a different tool. "Next thing I know, you'll be starting a podcast called Auto Shop Wisdom with Derek." Rex was racing around the yard, enjoying the freedom to run and play without anyone complaining about him being too energetic. Madison had always insisted he was too hyper and wanted him crated whenever she had friends over to visit. He definitely seemed happier and more relaxed these days, which made 2 of us. Then came what I can only describe as the shared items gambit. Madison sent me a detailed email with a demand list for various items from my apartment. Some of the requests were reasonable, gifts she had given me during our relationship, and I was perfectly fine returning those. But then she started demanding my own belongings that I had owned long before I ever met her. My sound system, vintage motorcycle parts from my personal collection, and even some of my tools. We had enjoyed using these things together during our relationship, but that doesn't change the fundamental fact of who actually owns them. The most audacious part was when she demanded expensive kitchen gadgets that had been wedding shower gifts sent directly to my address from my own relatives. The sheer audacity of that request was breathtaking. But the real masterpiece was what I started calling the financial fog machine. Madison's increasingly elaborate claims about money she had supposedly spent on wedding-related expenses. She claimed she had fronted thousands of dollars for various wedding vendors and services from her personal accounts, with the understanding that she would be reimbursed from our joint wedding fund when the time came. As I looked deeper into her claims, I found that she had actually produced some legitimate-looking invoices and receipts for these expenses. The problem was that I had never agreed to reimburse her for personal wedding attire expenses from our joint fund. Her dress was her responsibility, just like my suit was mine. That had always been our understanding. More concerning were the deposits she was claiming to have made. When I investigated the dates more carefully, I discovered that some of these payments were made after she had already canceled the main venue. So she had canceled our wedding, then continued spending money on photographers, florists, and other vendors for what exactly? A phantom wedding that she knew wasn't happening? It seemed far more likely that she was creating financial obligations deliberately to build a paper trail she could later use to extract more money from me, all while buying herself time with her break story to figure out her next move. She was also demanding that I pay half of the cancellation fees for vendors that she had booked and then canceled herself, including half of the main venue's $9,000 non-refundable deposit. She conveniently forgot that $4,500 of that lost deposit was already my money. Now she wanted me to pay another $4,500 on top of that, so she would be made completely whole while I would be out $9,000 total. The mathematics of the truly entitled is a special kind of creative accounting that defies all logic and fairness. Her parents backed her completely in all of these demands. Patricia even went so far as to call my mother directly to try to get her involved in pressuring me. My mom listened politely to Patricia's complaints and then basically told her that Madison had made some very poor decisions without consulting me. And now she was upset about facing the natural consequences of those choices. That conversation ended very quickly after my mom made her position clear. Stephanie left a series of increasingly sanctimonious voicemails on my phone, saying that I was obviously jealous that Madison came from money and I didn't, and that a real man would step up and do the right thing in this situation instead of being petty over a secret wedding cancellation. Okay, princess, I muttered to myself after listening to her latest rant. The harassment campaign continued to escalate as the Hawthorne family simply couldn't believe that their precious daughter was actually facing real consequences for her actions. So they decided to ramp up the pressure even further to try to force me into submission. Robert called my shop directly one afternoon, managing to get one of my mechanics on the phone. The poor guy came to my office looking completely confused and somewhat intimidated. Boss, there's some really angry dude on line one saying he's your almost father-in-law and demanding to speak to you immediately. He sounds pretty pissed off. I took the call in my office with the door closed, not wanting my employees to overhear what was sure to be an unpleasant conversation. Robert didn't bother with any pleasantries or polite conversation. Derek, this nonsense has gone far enough. You've made your point, and Madison is extremely upset about this whole situation. I'm sorry to hear that she's upset, I said, trying to keep my voice as neutral as possible. But I'm not sure what you expect me to do about it at this point. You know exactly what I expect. Return the money and we can all move forward from this unfortunate misunderstanding. I almost laughed out loud at his choice of words. Move forward to what exactly, Robert? Madison canceled our wedding without telling me, then left me a note saying I wasn't good enough for her. There's no moving forward from that. She was confused and under enormous pressure. Weddings are incredibly stressful and she made a mistake. But you're punishing her financially, which is spiteful and frankly beneath you. Robert, let me be completely clear about something. The money I withdrew was my contribution to our wedding fund. A wedding that no longer exists because your daughter canceled it without consulting me. I didn't take her money. I took mine. Robert sighed heavily, like he was talking to a particularly dense child who just couldn't grasp simple concepts. Look, son, I'm not your son, and I never will be, I interrupted firmly. Fine, Derek. Just be reasonable here. Madison has expenses and financial commitments that she made in good faith based on the assumption that this wedding was happening. After she canceled the venue? That's not good faith, Robert. That's manipulation. This situation isn't going away, Robert said, his voice hardening with obvious threat. We have options available to us. Legal options. Go for it, I replied, surprised at how calm and confident I felt. I've documented everything that's happened, and I have all the evidence I need. The call ended with Robert threatening vague consequences that never materialized into anything concrete. Later that same day, I received another email from Madison with a detailed spreadsheet attached, showing all of her outstanding wedding-related expenses that she expected me to cover half of. The total came to just over $19,000 in additional costs she wanted me to pay. I forwarded the entire email and spreadsheet to my lawyer without bothering to reply to her directly. That night, I took Rex for a long walk through our neighborhood. The cool evening air felt refreshing, and I found myself thinking about something Tyler had said to me earlier that week. You know what this is really about, right? He'd asked me over beers. It's not actually about the money at all. It's about the fact that you're probably the first person in her entire life who has ever said no to her. He was absolutely right. This whole situation wasn't really about $23,000. This was about control, manipulation, and a spoiled woman who had never been held accountable for her actions before. The next phase of their attack became much more targeted and personal. They started reaching out directly to people in my social circle, trying to gather information they could use against me or to damage my reputation. Tyler texted me early on a Friday morning with an urgent message. Dude, your ex's sister just called my workplace asking specifically for me. How the hell did she even get that number? I realized they had probably found my business's Facebook page, where Tyler had once tagged himself in a photo of us working on a motorcycle restoration project together. From there, it wouldn't have been difficult to track down where he worked. What did she want? I asked when we met up for lunch later that day. She was fishing for dirt on you, Tyler said, shaking his head in disbelief. She wanted to know if you had any history of being financially controlling with women, or if I'd ever seen signs that you were emotionally unstable or had anger management issues. I told her to eat dirt and hung up on her immediately. They contacted two of my other close friends using the same investigative tactics. One of them hung up the moment he realized what was happening. The other stayed on the line long enough to tell Stephanie exactly what he thought of her and her family's harassment tactics before slamming the phone down. Then they escalated to attacking my professional reputation. They started reaching out to some of my business clients, implying that I was unreliable and financially unstable, and suggesting that they should reconsider doing business with someone who was involved in legal troubles. Fortunately, most of my customers had known me and my work for years, and they immediately contacted me to let me know what was happening rather than believing the lies they were being told. One of my oldest and most loyal clients, a fleet manager for a local delivery company, called me directly after receiving one of these calls. Derek, I got a really weird phone call about you today. Some woman claiming to be your ex's mother said I should reconsider doing business with you because you're apparently in some kind of serious legal trouble. What the hell is that about? I explained the basic situation to him without going into all the personal details. He actually laughed when I finished. Well, that sure backfired on her spectacularly. I just signed off on getting those 4 new delivery vans serviced exclusively with your shop instead of taking them to the dealer. If they're trying this hard to mess with your business, you must be doing something right. The absolute last straw in their harassment campaign was when they decided to call my parents directly. My dad, who has never been one for long phone conversations or dramatic situations, simply said, "My son is an honest man who works hard for everything he has. Your daughter broke his heart, and you should all be ashamed of yourselves," and then hung up on them immediately. My response to all of this escalating harassment was methodical documentation of everything. I saved every email, every voicemail recording, and every text message from before the breakup that showed the timeline of events. I gathered my bank statements proving exactly when and how much I had contributed to our wedding fund. I collected confirmation from all the vendors I had dealt with directly, showing that no contracts or financial obligations were solely my responsibility. I had a consultation with a lawyer and showed him the complete timeline of events and all the documentation I had collected. I brought copies of our joint account agreement, which was thankfully a simple document stating that the funds were specifically intended for mutual wedding costs. I had proof of my financial contribution, evidence of my withdrawal after the venue cancellation, and the venue's written confirmation that Madison had canceled everything before leaving me the note. His professional assessment was straightforward and reassuring. "You're completely in the clear here," he said after reviewing everything. "The money you withdrew was verifiably yours, intended for a purpose that she unilaterally canceled without consulting you. Any subsequent spending or cancellation fees she incurred are entirely her problem to solve." His final advice was simple. "She's trying to pressure you into giving in. Don't let her succeed." "Smart move getting the lawyer involved," Tyler said when he dropped by the shop with lunch one day. Rex immediately abandoned his post at the front door to greet Tyler enthusiastically. "Traitor," I said, watching my dog's obvious preference for my best friend. "What did the consultation cost you, a couple $100? Tyler asked, offering Rex a piece of his sandwich. "Worth every penny for the peace of mind it gave me," I replied, taking the food Tyler had brought me. "Yeah, well, you can thank my brother-in-law Kevin for the referral. He was happy to help out, and he said that guys like you get completely screwed in these situations all the time because they try to be too nice and accommodating." "Not this time," I said firmly, biting into my sandwich. The expensive part of this whole situation was already happening to Madison, and it was entirely self-inflicted. She was on the hook for several non-refundable deposits that she had paid to various vendors after canceling the main wedding venue, but before having the break conversation with me. These were deposits she kept making while she was building a paper trail of expenses and figuring out how to extract more money from me. The photographer she absolutely had to have, the fancy cake designer whose work she'd seen in a magazine, the string quartet she insisted was essential for the ceremony that she knew wasn't happening. All of these vendors wanted their cancellation fees, and they were looking directly at Madison, not me. I hadn't been aggressive toward her or her family, and I hadn't tried to slander her reputation or damage her relationships. I had simply stepped aside, pulled my financial support, and withdrawn my money from a situation that no longer existed. It was fascinating to watch how quickly we and us became me and mine when the free financial ride came to an end. My resolve remained absolutely solid throughout all of their pressure tactics. Madison had wanted a break from our relationship, and she had gotten exactly that. A permanent, financially inconvenient break that forced her to deal with the consequences of her own choices. The worthless comment she had written in her note still stung sometimes during quiet moments late at night. But then I would look at the growing file of her increasingly unhinged demands and manipulative behavior, and I would think to myself, yeah, I'm definitely good enough to not put up with this kind of treatment. 1 month after everything had exploded, the entire situation became much more enlightening for me. The Hawthorne family's sense of entitlement reached its absolute crescendo, and then finally the music started to fade into silence. At least for them. For me, it had been a period of maintaining calm and drawing firm lines in the sand that I refused to let anyone cross. Their dirty tricks and harassment campaign continued for a bit longer, then gradually sputtered out when they realized it wasn't having the desired effect. Madison, working through her father Robert this time, actually had a lawyer send me an official demand letter. It was full of legal bluster and empty threats. The letter accused me of misappropriation of joint marital funds. Despite the fact that we weren't married, it claimed emotional distress and breach of promise to marry, referring to the promise that she had broken by calling everything off. The letter demanded that I return the $23,000 I had withdrawn, plus an additional $13,000 to cover her losses from canceled vendors and unspecified damages. So they wanted $36,000 total, which was absolutely ridiculous. My lawyer sent back a very polite, very factual 2-page response that included the complete timeline of events, copies of bank statements showing the money trail, and a gentle reminder that Madison's contracts with other vendors were entirely her own responsibility. This was especially true for contracts she had entered into after she had already secretly canceled the primary wedding venue. We never heard from their lawyer again after that response. I guess even he realized that he couldn't polish that particular legal turd into something presentable in court. Robert probably wasn't too happy about paying legal fees for such a completely unsuccessful intimidation attempt. The social media passive-aggressive posting campaign also fizzled out around the same time. I think some of Madison's friends, maybe even Jessica, started to piece together the real timeline of what had happened. Or maybe they just got bored with the ongoing drama and moved on to other things. Jessica, who had been enthusiastically liking and commenting on all of Madison's victim posts, suddenly went completely radio silent on social media. When your sob story doesn't result in actual cash or meaningful support, people tend to lose interest pretty quickly. Then came what I can only describe as a somewhat pathetic final confrontation attempt. Madison somehow managed to get me on the phone by calling from yet another unknown number. I had unblocked her number for exactly 1 day out of a weird sense of curiosity about what she might say, which turned out to be a big mistake. Or maybe it wasn't a mistake at all, because it was definitely clarifying. She went straight into full victim mode, wailing about how I had ruined everything in her life and how she was now drowning in debt with various vendors hounding her for payment. When I asked her point blank who had made the decision to cancel the wedding venue in secret, she claimed she had been under enormous pressure and was confused about what to do. But she insisted that I didn't have to be so vindictive by taking all that money from the account. When I pointed out that it was specifically my money, contributed for a wedding that she had decided wasn't happening, she said that a real man would have covered those expenses for her anyway, just to be a gentleman about the whole situation. I told her, "A gentleman by your definition sounds like a doormat with a bank account, and that's definitely not me." When she started crying about how much this whole situation had cost her financially, I told her calmly that it had cost her exactly what her own choices had incurred. Nothing more, nothing less. A week after that phone call, Stephanie tried one final ambush at a coffee shop that I frequent regularly. She stormed over to my table where I was working on my laptop, designer purse swinging dramatically, looking all puffed up with righteous indignation. She started hissing at me about what I had supposedly done to destroy her sister's life. I didn't even bother looking up from my laptop screen. I just told her there was nothing left to discuss between any of us. Her sister had made her choices and was now living with the natural consequences of those decisions. I suggested that she and her parents should help Madison sort out her financial problems, since they had been instrumental in influencing her decisions in the first place. That's when Stephanie decided to drop her little bombshell, thinking it would somehow hurt me. Madison had apparently already upgraded to Marcus, the surgeon's son of her father's golf buddy. According to Stephanie, they had been seeing each other for several weeks, starting almost immediately after Madison had left me. Marcus was apparently already talking about helping Madison with her debt problems. "That's what a real man does for the woman he cares about," Stephanie said with obvious smugness. I just shrugged and told her, "Good for Madison. I hope Marcus knows what he's getting himself into." Stephanie went into full snob mode, saying that Madison had always been too good for some grease monkey, and that now she finally knew it too. I got up and left the coffee shop while she was still mid-rant, letting her explode on her own time without an audience. From what I managed to piece together through various sources, Madison's credit card debt had been piling up steadily throughout this entire ordeal. The vendors she had simply ghosted after canceling services were aggressively pursuing their cancellation fees, exactly as they should have been doing. Her parents were helping her financially, but I could guarantee that assistance came with a lifetime supply of "I told you so" lectures and "How could you be so foolish?" guilt trips. I did receive one final, completely unexpected email from Jessica, who had been Madison's best friend and biggest supporter throughout our relationship. She basically apologized for her previous behavior and said that she had only heard Madison's side of the story initially, but was now seeing the situation very differently after learning more details about what had actually happened. I didn't bother replying to Jessica's message. There wasn't really anything left to say at that point. While all of this drama had been unfolding around me, I had deliberately focused my energy on what actually mattered in my life: my business. The motorcycle garage had been doing well before all this started, but I had been so caught up in wedding planning and dealing with Madison's family drama that I had put several expansion plans on hold. With the $23,000 back in my personal account where it belonged, and with no wedding to plan or in-laws to appease, I suddenly had both the financial capital and the mental bandwidth to make some moves I'd been considering for months. I hired another skilled mechanic to help with the increased workload, invested in some new diagnostic equipment that I'd been wanting for years, and started offering specialized services for European motorcycles. This was something I had wanted to do for a long time, but had never had the resources or focus to implement properly. It turned out that customers with expensive Ducatis and BMWs who didn't want to pay outrageous dealer prices were more than happy to find a skilled independent shop that could handle their bikes properly. The irony wasn't lost on me, considering how Robert had treated me like hired help when he wanted me to look at his precious Porsche. This new business direction was paying off in ways I hadn't expected. Revenue was up 26% compared to the same quarter the previous year. My employees were getting specialized training and developing new skills, and word was spreading throughout the motorcycle community about our expanded capabilities. I even had to start turning away some work because we were booked solid for 4 weeks out. Tyler stopped by the shop one afternoon when I was going over the quarterly financial reports. Rex greeted him with his usual boundless enthusiasm, tail wagging like crazy. "Looks like you're doing pretty well for a guy who's supposedly worthless," Tyler said jokingly, glancing at the spreadsheet displayed on my computer screen. "Turns out being single is actually really good for business," I replied with a laugh. "Who would have thought? You should send Madison a thank you note," Tyler suggested with a grin. "Dear Madison, thanks for dumping me so I could focus on making actual money instead of planning elaborate ways to impress your awful family." I laughed at the idea. "Yeah, I'm sure that would go over really well with them." "Seriously though," Tyler said, leaning against my desk and becoming more thoughtful. "You completely dodged a bullet here. Can you imagine being tied to those people for the rest of your life? Having to deal with their constant judgment and condescension at every family gathering?" I nodded in agreement. He was absolutely right. As painful as the breakup had been initially, it would have been infinitely worse to spend decades dealing with the Hawthorne family's endless judgment and Madison's increasing resentment of my background. "Speaking of bullets dodged," Tyler continued curiously, "have you heard anything about what's happening with the new guy? The surgeon she supposedly upgraded to?" "Not a word," I said honestly, "and I'm perfectly happy keeping it that way. That chapter of my life is completely closed." Little did I know that particular story was just beginning to unfold in ways that would make my situation look simple by comparison. It's been nearly 6 months since that last uncomfortable phone call with Madison, and about 8 months since my entire world tilted on its axis and everything changed. Life has a way of moving forward whether you're ready or not, and I have to say that things are much quieter now than they were during the height of all that drama. The anger and hurt that consumed me for weeks after the breakup has mostly faded into something more like indifference. I don't actively rejoice in hearing about Madison's financial struggles, but I also don't lose any sleep over them either. She built that particular bed through her own choices, and now she's sleeping in it exactly as she should be. From the little information that filters back to me through mutual acquaintances, Madison is still dealing with the ongoing financial fallout from her wedding cancellation decisions. She apparently had to move back into her childhood bedroom at Robert and Patricia's house for several months to save money on rent, which I can only imagine was its own special kind of hell for everyone involved. The dream wedding debt has apparently become a very sore subject that nobody in the family wants to discuss. About a month ago, I ran into Jessica at the grocery store while I was picking up food for the week. She looked genuinely uncomfortable when she spotted me, but she came over anyway to ask how I was doing with everything. When I told her that I was doing well and had moved on completely, she asked if I had heard about what had happened with Madison's new relationship. That's when Jessica dropped an absolute bombshell that I never saw coming. It turns out that Marcus, the doctor that Madison had started seeing immediately after leaving me, wasn't actually a surgeon at all. He wasn't even wealthy. He was a sophisticated con artist who specifically targeted rich families by pretending to be something he wasn't. Marcus had somehow convinced Robert to invest a substantial amount of money in what he claimed was a revolutionary medical technology startup. Then he simply disappeared with all the money, leaving the entire family financially devastated and emotionally humiliated. They were desperately trying to keep the whole situation quiet, but word had gotten out throughout their social circle anyway. I couldn't help but laugh when I heard this news. Karma really is a bitch sometimes. But the best part of the whole story, according to Jessica, was that Madison and Stephanie had a complete nuclear meltdown over the situation. Madison blamed Stephanie for introducing them in the first place and for pushing her to leave me for someone better. She apparently called Stephanie a toxic bitch during Robert's birthday dinner in front of the entire extended family and all their friends. The two sisters are no longer speaking to each other, and Stephanie has been banned from family functions indefinitely. You honestly can't make this stuff up. It almost makes me feel bad for Madison, Tyler said when I told him the whole story over Chinese takeout that evening. We were sitting in my backyard while Rex chased a tennis ball around the grass. Almost, but not quite. The irony is absolutely unreal, I agreed, taking a bite of my lo mein. They thought I wasn't good enough for their family, and then they got completely taken for $500,000 by some con artist who was pretending to be exactly what they wanted. Just goes to show, Tyler said thoughtfully. Sometimes the best revenge is just getting out of the way and letting karma do its thing naturally. I was finishing up some paperwork at the garage late one Tuesday evening when Madison unexpectedly showed up at my shop. She looked noticeably thinner and more drawn than I remembered, but she was still dressed impeccably in expensive clothes. She said she wanted to talk to me about something important. Against my better judgment, I decided to give her exactly 5 minutes to say whatever she had come to say. Rex, who had been dozing peacefully in his bed behind the counter, immediately perked up when Madison walked through the door. He didn't growl or show any aggression, but he deliberately moved to stand between us, watching her carefully with obvious suspicion. Smart dog. He remembered exactly who she was and how she had treated both of us. Madison started with the waterworks almost immediately, saying that she had made a huge mistake by listening to her family's advice, especially Stephanie's constant manipulations. She said that Marcus had been a complete disaster, that her family was a mess, and that she was now living in her childhood bedroom at the age of 30 with mounting debt and no real prospects. She said she missed me desperately and that she had learned her lesson about what really mattered in life. She claimed that we could try again and make things work if I was willing to give her another chance. I felt absolutely nothing while watching her cry and plead with me. When she finished her prepared speech about how much she had changed and grown as a person, I simply said, "No." Her face fell dramatically. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no, we're not getting back together. We're not trying again. There is no us anymore, Madison. That ended when you left me a note calling me worthless." The tears didn't stop, but something calculated and manipulative entered her eyes. She asked, "There's someone new in your life, right? You've already moved on and found someone else?" When I told her that my personal life wasn't her concern anymore, she got angry, and the tears dried up quickly. She accused me of being deliberately cruel after she had come to apologize and humble herself. She said I was being vindictive and holding grudges. "You came here because your backup plan failed spectacularly and you need somewhere safe to land," I told her calmly. "I'm not that place anymore." Her face hardened completely, and she accused me of enjoying watching her suffer and having a vindictive streak that she had never seen before. I told her she needed to leave immediately, or I would call the police to have her removed from my property. As she walked toward the door, she turned back and said that I would regret this decision. She said that when I was alone in my little garage, I would wish I had been smart enough to give us another chance when I had the opportunity. I smiled for the first time since she had walked into my shop. "I'd rather be alone in my garage than with someone who thinks I'm worthless," I replied. Later that night, I texted Tyler about the unexpected visit. "You'll never guess who showed up at the shop today." His response came back quickly. "Princess Entitlement herself. What did she want?" "To try again. Said she's changed and learned her lesson." "And you said?" "Hell no. That's my boy. Dinner Friday to celebrate your continued freedom? You're buying. In your dreams, cheapskate." As for me and how things turned out, the $23,000 that I had withdrawn from our joint wedding account went straight back into my personal savings where it had always belonged in the first place. I kept Madison's engagement ring, and it's currently sitting in a safe deposit box at my bank. Maybe one day I'll decide to sell it, or maybe it'll just remain there as a very expensive reminder of what happens when you ignore red flags in a relationship. I've been on a couple of casual dates since everything ended, but nothing serious has developed yet. I'm not in any kind of rush to jump into another relationship. I've learned that it's better to take time to really know someone before making any major commitments, and I want to be completely sure about the next person I get involved with. My revenge, if you can even call it that, was simply to hold Madison accountable for her own actions and decisions. I didn't stoop to her family's level of manipulation and harassment. I didn't engage in mudslinging or try to damage her reputation. I just stated the facts clearly, protected my money from being stolen, and walked away with my dignity intact. Rex and I moved to a smaller apartment that's much closer to the shop. There was no point in keeping the larger place that we had rented with Madison's lifestyle and preferences in mind. The new place is exactly right for just the two of us, and I can actually walk to work now instead of driving. There's also a dog park nearby where Rex has made his own circle of four-legged friends. So yeah, life isn't a fairy tale, and sometimes the princess reveals herself to be more interested in the royal treasury than the actual prince. Sometimes the guy who's supposedly worthless turns out to be good enough to see through the deception and manipulation, and smart enough to walk away with his dignity and his savings completely intact. Looking back on everything that happened, I realized that Madison and her family did me an enormous favor, even though that certainly wasn't their intention. They showed me exactly who they really were when the pressure was on, and they revealed their true values when it mattered most. Better to learn these lessons during an engagement than after a wedding, when disentangling our lives would have been infinitely more complicated and expensive. The motorcycle garage continues to thrive, and I'm prouder of what I've built than I've ever been before. My employees respect me, my customers trust me, and I've created something meaningful with my own hands and hard work. That's worth more than all the approval from wealthy in-laws that money could ever buy. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can do is simply refuse to accept treatment that's beneath your dignity. Sometimes the strongest response to manipulation is just to walk away and let people face the natural consequences of their own choices. And sometimes the person everyone thinks is worthless turns out to be the one with enough self-respect to know when enough is enough. Rex seems happier these days too, which makes two of us. He gets to sleep on the bed whenever he wants. He doesn't have to be crated when I have friends over. And he's free to be his energetic, playful self without anyone complaining about it. Dogs have an amazing ability to live in the present moment, and I'm trying to learn from his example. The truth is, I wouldn't change how any of this played out, even if I could go back and do it differently. Madison's decision to leave taught me more about my own strength and values than years of a comfortable relationship ever could have. Her family's harassment showed me that I'm capable of standing up for myself even when facing coordinated pressure from multiple directions. And most importantly, removing myself from that toxic dynamic allowed me to focus on building something real and lasting. A business I'm proud of, friendships based on mutual respect, and a life that's authentically mine rather than a performance designed to impress people whose approval was never worth having in the first place. Sometimes the best revenge really is just living well.